Caterpillar 3412E and 3408E industrial and machine engines have the hydraulically actuated, electronically controlled unit injector fuel system. This fuel system, commonly called HUE, uses the engine's lubricating oil, boosted by a high-pressure oil pump, to actuate the unit injectors. The engine's electronic control module, or ECM, regulates the exact pressure output of the high-pressure oil pump. The oil pressure then determines the pressure of the fuel injected into the combustion chamber. Symptoms such as loss of power or difficult starts could be indications that the high-pressure pump is worn or has failed. You should use the troubleshooting procedure section found in the service manual to eliminate any other possible causes and verify that the cause of these symptoms is in fact the high-pressure pump. This video demonstrates the step-by-step disassembly and assembly procedures for reworking the unit injector hydraulic pump, part numbers 134-9405 or 144-0835. The former pump, part number 134-1598, cannot be reworked. Caterpillar recommends replacing this pump with the 144-0837 pump. The fuel injection pump kit, part number 154-6732, contains the replacement parts you need to rework the pump: control piston, shaft, yoke, seal kit, front bearing, and rotating group. You also will need several other parts and tools to complete the procedure. These include a rear bearing, part number 154-6734, and 2 Pintle bearings, part number 154-6735, and 7 special tools for the pump disassembly and assembly. These tools must be fabricated according to the drawings in Caterpillar's Special Instruction Booklet, media number REHS 0192. Let's go over the disassembly of the unit injector hydraulic pump. When removing the unit injector hydraulic pump and mounting group from the engine, leave the fuel transfer pump on the unit injector hydraulic pump. Here are the steps for disassembly. Remove the 4 bolts from the fuel transfer pump. Then remove the transfer pump from the hydraulic pump. Remove the 4 bolts from the compensator. Then remove the compensator and the adapter. Remove the 4 O-ring seals from the bottom side of the adapter, and then remove the 4 O-ring seals from the 2 housings. Remove the 11 bolts from the valve block. And then remove the valve block, the control piston, and the housing gasket from the hydraulic pump group. Invert the pump group and remove the rotating group. Place the rotating group on a soft surface and be sure that the 3 pins are held firmly in place by the retaining spring. Do not remove the snap ring on the bottom of the rotating group. Install the shaft removal tool, special tool FT-2610, and use the hydraulic press to remove the shaft from the front bearing. Remove the 8 bolts from the 2 Pintle bearing covers and remove the covers. Remove the O-ring seal from the Pintle bearing opposite the spring. Install the bolt, part number 4D3120, into the Pintle bearing, finger tight. Insert the bolt into the Pintle bearing using an impact wrench until the Pintle bearing is removed. Insert the bolt into the other Pintle bearing until that Pintle bearing is removed. Hold the yoke firmly so that no damage will occur during the removal of the pintle bearing. Remove the yoke and then remove the spring and the spring seat. Protect the housing surface by placing the face on a soft surface. Remove the snap ring and the front bearing, and the snap ring and the shaft seal. Visually inspect the rear bearing. Replace the bearing only if it's defective. If the rear bearing is defective, use the rear bearing remover, special tool FT2612, and the hydraulic press to remove the rear bearing. Protect the housing surface by placing the face on a soft surface. Now, let's reassemble the unit injector hydraulic pump. Once you've inspected the rear bearing and determined that it needs to be replaced, start the pump assembly by using the installer special tool FT2608, the positioning tool special tool FT2609, and the hydraulic press to install the rear bearing. Install the front bearing and the snap ring. Next, install the spring seat, the spring, and the yoke. Use the yoke fixture, special tool FT2606, the bearing press, special tool FT2607, and the hydraulic press to install the spring side pintle bearing. Be sure to start the outer race of the second pintle bearing in the pump housing opposite the spring. Use the two bearing press tools and the hydraulic press to install the pintle bearing into the pump housing opposite the spring. Install the front bearing support, special tool FT2611, into the pump housing. Use the coupling from the fuel transfer pump to press the shaft back into the proper position. Install the two O-ring seals and the two pintle bearing covers. Tighten the bolts to a torque of 20 plus or minus 1 Newton meters, or 177 plus or minus 9 inch-pounds. Oil the yoke liberally with clean engine oil and make sure that the yoke moves freely. Start installing the rotating group by positioning the housing with the internal end of the shaft angled downward. Next, slide the rotating group over the shaft and into the housing. Be sure that the shoes of the rotating group are seated against the yoke. Once you've installed the rotating group, turn it to be sure the 3 pins are still in the designated notches. If the rotating group jams, the pins need to be reinserted into the proper position. The pins are held in by the retaining ring. Install the housing gasket. Oil the face of the valve block liberally with clean engine oil. Place the control piston onto the control shaft. Next, install the valve block. Create a vacuum by placing one finger over the large middle hole in the mounting surface of the valve block. This will hold the control piston in place while you install the valve block. Be sure the housing gasket is not damaged while aligning the valve block with the pins in the pump housing. Start turning the bolts in the valve block by hand. Tighten the bolts by alternating from all 4 sides, torquing the bolts on the corners first. Tighten to a torque of 27 plus or minus 2 Newton meters, or 20 plus or minus 1 pound-feet. Install the 4 O-ring seals on the bottom side of the adapter, then install the 4 O-ring seals on the 2 housings. Next, install the compensator and the adapter vertically as a unit, so the O-rings are not damaged. Tighten the screws to a torque of 8 plus or minus 1 Newton meters, 70 plus or minus 9 inch-pounds. Oil the shaft seals sparingly with clean engine oil. Then use the installer, special tool FT2608, to lower the shaft seal below the edge of the bore. Place the snap ring against the shaft seal below the edge of the bore and use the installer, special tool FT2608, to lower the shaft seal and snap ring until it snaps into position. Install the fuel transfer pump. Be sure the coupling is installed. Use a half-inch crowfoot and socket wrench combination to tighten the bolts to 14 Newton meters or 120 inch-pounds. You can now install the unit injector hydraulic pump and mounting group on the engine. Prime the pump by adding approximately 1 quart of clean engine oil to the reservoir of the pump through the inlet. With the high-pressure pump installed and primed, you can now start the engine and operate it normally.